Today we're going to be making this very simple wool beanie using a stretchy brim and then alternating between single and double crochet stitches. And for this I am going to be working with the Juniper Moon Farm wool yarn, and this is a size 3 light yarn, and we have roughly 200 yards of it. We'll also be working with a size G or 6 or 4¼ millimeter crochet hook. And this beanie tutorial does have a precursor video, and that is my how to crochet a stretchy brim. The link should be right up here for you, as well as in the description. So for that pattern, we're using our same crochet hook, and we're going to crochet a brim that is 32 stitches wide. And I crocheted this pattern until I had a total of 64 of my vertical ridges. So once you have your 32 stitch wide brim, then I want you to make sure that you've ended your last row on the opposite side of your starting tail. And we're going to fold this in half and crochet our two edges together to create a circle. And when it comes to crocheting these two edges, I want you to make sure you've placed a chain stitch at the end of your last row, and then we are going to line up our corresponding stitches. And we're going to skip our turning chain, and we're going to dive right into our last slip stitch like this. And then you want to insert your crochet hook into your last chain stitch from the very first row, just like this. And we're just going to yarn over and pull through all the loops on our crochet hook for a slip stitch. So from here, we're just going to repeat this pattern going all the way down our brim to join the short edges. And you are inserting your crochet hook up underneath both loops. I'm not sure if I mentioned that, but just make sure you're working under both loops of your slip stitch as well as your chain like this. And once you're done joining your two edges, it should look something like this. And we have this sort of ugly ridge here, so we're going to turn this inside out. And you can see that really cleans up the seam. So we're going to continue working our beanie right here along this top edge. You can see we have these available loops where we have our ridges. So we're going to start right here in this very first loop, and we're going to place a single crochet. And I would like for you to crochet over your tail during this portion if you want to, by just lining it up with that loop. From here, we're just going to place a single crochet in that first loop, and then we're going to place a double crochet in our second loop. And that's going to be our pattern going all the way around our row, just alternating between placing a single crochet and then a double crochet, and maybe working over the tail if you feel up to it. So when you get to the end of your row, you should have a total of 64 stitches. And so now that you've gotten to the end of your row, I want you to add one more additional stitch. So you can do this anywhere. You can put it back in that same loop where you already worked, or just somewhere in the middle here between your first single crochet and your last stitch, which is a double crochet. So I'm just going to place my single crochet right here. So now this should line up perfectly to where our next stitch is a single crochet stitch. So we should be placing a double crochet on top of it. And then this next stitch, which in our previous row was a double crochet, should now be a single crochet. So just doing the opposite of what we did in our last row, and this should flow seamlessly. So you can see here that we're creating a spiral pattern instead of a traditional pattern where you would start and stop your individual rows. So we're just going to repeat this pattern for multiple rows, so I will join back up with you when it's time to decrease and close this hole at the top of our beanie. I went ahead and placed roughly 10 rows of my alternating between my single and double crochet stitches. So for this next part, you're going to need a scrap piece of yarn or a stitch marker to mark the first stitch in each row. So what we're going to do is we're going to place a decreasing stitch, which I will show you in a second. We're going to place that in 4 random spots in our row. So make sure you've ended your last row where you've placed a single crochet for your last stitch. So what we're going to do from here is we're going to double crochet together the following stitch, and then we're going to skip that middle stitch and double crochet together with this 3rd stitch right here. So what that looks like is we're going to yarn over and then insert our crochet hook in that 1st stitch, and we're going to yarn over and pull up through. Then we're going to skip this next stitch altogether and then insert our crochet hook in that following stitch. And we're going to yarn over and pull up through there. So we have 4 loops on our crochet hook. So we're just going to yarn over and drop 2 loops and then yarn over and drop 3. And I'm going to go ahead and mark that single crochet right before that decrease as the 1st stitch of this row. So from here, we're just going to pick up with our pattern. So we just placed a double crochet. So now we're going to place a single crochet. And this should still line up to where you're placing the opposite of the stitch you're working in. And we want to place that decreasing stitch. So we're just going to randomly place this at 4 different places in our row. So we already placed the 1st decreasing stitch. And at the end of the row, you should have a total of 57 stitches. So from here, we're just going to repeat our last row, making sure that we randomize where we're placing those decreasing stitches in each of our rows to avoid any sort of pattern forming. And each row you should decrease by 8. So go ahead and decrease this down until the hole at the top of the beanie is very, very small, and I'll show you what to do from there. And once you've crocheted this down to where the hole at the top of your beanie is very, very small, then we're going to cut and tie off our yarn, and we're going to leave a really long tail. And now we're going to tie off our yarn. And we are going to weave our tail in and out of these stitches along this top row here. And once you're done weaving your tail, then I want you to pull on it, and that should close up the gap in the top of your beanie. So now we just need to secure this a few times by tying it together. And so that is it. You are now done with your beanie. Check the links in the description for my different pom-pom tutorials. Thank you so much for working with me, and I hope you have a wonderful, awesome day.